Welcome to the Biltmore Church Podcast. Our church exists to glorify God by making disciples of Jesus who reach up, reach in, and reach out. And this podcast is a resource that's hopefully going to help you do just that. We're back for season 6, kicking off 2025 here in our year of community. It's going to be so cool as we continue to have conversations about what it looks like to live out the gospel each and every week. And we're going to do that today a little bit here in just a few minutes. So quick introductions. My name is Christian Cooper. I serve on staff here, and we're going to be joined today by our lead pastor, Bruce Frank, and also Michelle Myers, who is our discipleship coordinator. And so today we're going to be talking about Romans 12, our teaching text from last Sunday, and specifically about how to build a rule of life, which is something that Pastor Bruce talked for several minutes about in his message last week. So before we jump in, Michelle, if you can read our scripture from last Sunday, Romans 12, 1-2.
I appeal to you, therefore, brothers, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect.
All right, today we're going to have a great conversation about some practical steps coming out of last week's message. We're going to talk about building a rule of life a little bit. Before we do that, Pastor, you mentioned something yesterday that I wanted to explore a little bit. We were just in a meeting talking through some of this stuff, and you said that you were like, I think the word you used is, it was like a fascinating week of sermon prep, getting ready for this message. I just kind of wanted to ask you about that and kind of get into some of that background of what it was like prepping last week.
Well, no, I mean, the whole thing was on how do you change the things in you that you hate? And everybody's got that question. Everybody's got stuff. They're like, I don't like that. But then looking at what is, as I mentioned, probably a top 5 or 10 verse. You know, once you become a Christian, if you're getting discipled at all, this is probably one of those verses that or that you're going to get encouraged to memorize. So again, I've memorized it forever. But I was shocked when I kind of was trying to think, okay, it's a little 2-part series. How does God change you based off the call? And then I was looking, I got my little cheat sheet that tells me, because it's better than my memory. So it's like, all right, here. And I was like, man, I hadn't done Romans 12, 1 and 2. I was like, how in the world is that not? How does that happen? So, and then once we got into it, just the whole, what I was talking about, just the whole, the comment of when science catches up to the Bible. But the whole neuroscience, Huberman, neuroplasticity, renewal of the mind, it was just kind of cool. I mean, you can go down the rabbit hole with it. Yeah. And then it was like a couple years ago, I think on this podcast, actually, we had Donna Gibbs, and she's gone down deeper in that whole realm. But again, it was fascinating to both personally identify where just, you subtly can buy into lies, whether it be...
Right.
Boy, if I have this possession, I mean, it'll always go through those 3, lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes, pride of life. But there's a bunch of different lies within each of those 3. And then how do you get rid of, because I didn't grow up in church. So I had many years to have patterns, many years to have ruts that were nothing but lies. So again, you're still having to, I think everybody thinks they're going to be further along than they are.
Yeah.
I mean, 5 years ago, if you thought, okay, but some of that same stuff you got to battle your whole life, depending on your upbringing or a bunch of different factors. But the whole renewal of the mind and trying to figure out how that works personally, and then knowing that that's what people, I mean, I'm a terrible counselor, but that would be that'd be some of the stuff. If you don't change your thinking, you are not going to change long-term.
Right.
Long-term, the behavior doesn't change. It can change as long as your willpower, or, maybe put some structures in place. But as far as actually biblical gospel change, where your heart changes, it comes from, first of all, getting the truth in there. And then as the truth gets in there, your heart begins to change toward the way you look at it. And that's really the kind of obedience God wants. He wants to do, I love God, and I want to do what glorifies God and also what's best for my soul versus, I'm going to do it, we're going to do it. That's where that, the Comer, I think it was a Comer illustration about the difference between trying and training. That was helpful too.
Yeah, very helpful.
Because trying is, people get tired of trying and failing, but training, you're like, all right, I can just, take it mile by mile, brick by brick, and then eventually you're a lot further down than, a lot further ahead than you thought you would, you might be.
Yeah.
Right.
Michelle and I were talking yesterday about, there's a super popular book out called Atomic Habits. And the guy, as far as I know, is not a believer, but he's, there's some really fascinating stuff to go back to your point of when science catches up to the Bible. and he talks about how most of the time people try to change their behavior as a way to change their identity. But in reality, most behavior change flows out of identity change.
100%.
Mm-hmm.
Now he has no answer for how, like real logical answer for how to change your identity.
Yeah.
But one of the things that you've talked about a lot is, I think that the verbiage we use a lot is, I hate your identity. Your changing identity leads to a change in activity, not the other way around.
I mean, that's kingdom change, identity change. And there's tons of examples. Woman at the well is the classic example. I don't condemn you, go and sin no more. I don't condemn you, your identity changed. Go and sin no more. From that identity change, then your activity changes.
I have an eating disorder background, and I've thought about this from the perspective of when I admitted that I had a problem and I started getting some help, there were immediately some things in place where I just started choosing different actions. But it took my brain years to catch up. I still, like, I would do the right things, but it felt like a mental fight up here. And then I had so many habits that I had to unlearn before I could learn new ones. But I think when you don't stop at the habit, when you do keep going, there is something incredible that happens, because most people that have an eating disorder background tell you that once you battle that, you never get over it, that you always struggle it. And that very much minimizes the power of Christ and what he can do.
For sure.
Because I would have never thought, if you had told me, I would have never believed that I could have a season of my life where that doesn't hold me captive. But it really doesn't have a foothold in my life anymore.
That's awesome.
It doesn't mean that I don't intentionally pray about it. It doesn't mean that other people don't intentionally pray for me. It doesn't mean that I'm not careful and there's not guardrails and boundaries that I put in place there. But I definitely see the power of a new mind in that.
Yep.
Well, and to go back to Donna's illustration from a couple of years ago, I'm probably going to butcher this because she's going to do it way better than I can rehash it. But she was talking about sledding and how if you go down the same trail over and over again, the snow packs down, it's easier to go down that same way. But once you start creating a new pathway, it starts to become natural. And so it's the same thing where you start to create those new, what she would say, neural pathways, renewing the mind. It becomes easier and easier as you go to keep that behavior change.
I mean, and we see it all the time. You see it like if you have a dog and they run the same path and eventually the grass gets worn out in that path, it's just deeper and deeper and deeper. And so you either got, I don't care how much new grass you put, whatever, they will wear it out.
I fought that battle.
And you got to train a new one, for sure. Another thing that seemed to connect, because sometimes it feels like a zero-sum game with whatever you're battling. It's like, and then when you lose, it can be devastating because a lot of it's tied up into shame and disappointment in yourself and a lot of that kind of stuff versus, all right, I'm getting more and more victory. There's longer lengths of time between my failures. And so, the example I use is like if somebody was used to losing their temper almost every time they come home from work, and then the Lord begins to change them from the inside out, that might look like, I've gone like 4 days. And it's not that they're like, I'm not going to lose my temper. I mean, it's like, that kind of organic or kind of mechanical change. Like, I'm going to love somebody. How are you going to, but it starts to happen. And then longer periods of time between the failures, it's like I went a whole week and I never lost my temper. I never saw a cross word. And a lot of that's just the way it, I'm all right, Jesus is patient with me. He's changing something on the inside. We'd call it, Galatians calls it the fruit of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, patience. But that's the organic change. But again, longer periods of time between failures, that is progress.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little about how to create some structure and some rhythm so that you can make some progress in some of those areas. You did an awesome job kind of in the back half of the message introducing, I think probably for a lot of people is a new idea. And I think you reference a very ancient terminology when you say a rule of life, but you're basically meaning your habits, your rhythms that help you become the person that God's calling you to be.
Exactly.
So I wanted to just maybe big general question, then we can dive into some specific thoughts. But it seems kind of like, and correct me if I'm wrong here, everybody's sort of got a rule of life, a way that they live. It just might not necessarily be taking them in the direction that they want to go. And we need to alter that, or what would be your thinking on that?
Oh, 1,000%. We all have to. We all have rhythm. Number one, everybody's got a rhythm. Daily rhythm, weekly rhythm, monthly rhythm, annual. We not exact, but just rhythms, things we do. And the question you have to ask is, are these rhythms helping me to my deepest desires, my deepest goals? So for the Christian, for example, if you're like, I want a great relationship with my kids, but if my rhythm is to sit there with, let's say, this phone when everybody's home, let's say you have whatever, a 5-year-old. If my rhythm is to sit there in the lazy boy and to scroll for that prime time between whatever, after dinner to 8:30,
Right.
that is not a rhythm that is accomplishing what you want to happen.
Right.
Because if Junior's over there, well, of course, 5 years old, hopefully they're not scrolling on Instagram, but whatever. But if you're doing that and they're 5 feet away from you, and your rhythm is to look at this for 2 hours versus conversing with 5-year-old, that is a rhythm that's not getting you where it's getting the shallow desires. I want to get the dopamine hit, but it's not getting you what you really want at the soul level.
Yeah, yeah. So let's just jump right into that idea then and maybe ask several questions about some very simple ideas for how to create good rhythms. But first of all, to go to your example, what would you say are some rhythms and habits that most people need to think about eliminating from their life? Maybe it's straight up sin, maybe it's not. But just those things that aren't helping them head in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to what we talked about pretty often, what the Puritans called the mortification, vivification. Mortification stuff I got to get out of my life that is not helping me and is killing me, really. I think it was it Owen that said, be killing sin or sin will be killing you. So, I mean, there's some stuff that flat out, and usually that stuff is, when you peel it back, that's sin. Now, sometimes it's more black and white than others, the ones that are maybe not as clear, but you're like, what, let's say a person, every time you're with that person, every time, you go down the wrong place. Every time I'm with that person, we go out to this club, and when I go out to this club, when I go to this place, now it's going to a club, absolutely black and white sin 100% of the time. There's not a verse you can do, but if you're looking at it going, every time I go with that person to that club, that does not turn out well. Well, you know what? For right now, you need to cut that out, because that is going to eventually cost you a lot. But the parts the rhythms you want to add in would be stuff, what fires me up? Now, some of them are common for all of us, because all three of us, we need the Word. All three of us need to talk to God.
Right.
All three of us need community.
Right.
But then there's some stuff that's maybe just the way God wired you. I mean, we were joking before we came on air about, James, Michelle's husband, who likes to hunt, and Michelle, who does not like to hunt.
Yeah.
That kind of probably, it helps. I mean, it does something at the good soul level for James that does not with Michelle.
No, I do not. I don't get it.
And I would say the same thing with Lori. I mean, I love sitting in the woods because you actually have to be quiet, and you can't. It almost forces you to calm down. And generally, if you just have anything, you can actually. It is a way to get your soul refreshed with the Lord. Lori, that would not be refreshing at all for her. It's kind of, we joke about like in retirement or whatever. She's like, oh, I'd love to get an RV and like drive around the country. And I'm like, that's hell.
Yeah,
that would be. We could also fly somewhere and stay at a nice hotel.
There you go.
So anyway, all that being said, it's just different. But I think you have to just ask: and we all are guilty of doing. So like somebody's like, oh, I want to be healthy. The doctor, even doctors tell you, you need to do this. You need to stop doing this, or this is going to, and we're like, and if we don't do it, we're basically saying, I like my short-term, it's terrible long-term judgment. I'm going to do my short-term stuff, and maybe the long-term will work out. And rhythms are basically trying to put stuff in a way that's like, I want my soul to flourish, and I know that if my soul flourishes, a lot of people, we're starting a family series this week, and I heard a deal saying, this is not just meant to change a life, it's meant to change a legacy. Meaning that there are concentric circles. All of us have concentric circles. People that are affected by your relationship with the Lord. Even lost people. If you and I are not flourishing in the Lord, we tend to not be great witnesses. We tend to not even be vocal witnesses. We just are walking in our own little deal. But when we're flourishing and thriving and walking with the Lord and boldness and all that stuff, everybody's affected in a good way. So again, there's always more, not at risk. There's always more at stake than we tend to think.
We have a limited amount of hours and time, and a lot of people are like, oh, I just can't get up early. Well, you could if you went to bed earlier. And so I think late nights sometimes are one of those things that probably don't do many of us much good. I think overcommitment is probably another one that's really easy to nobilize. But when you actually look at what your calendar looks like, then you don't have time to give the right amount of energy where it actually needs to go. And then a lot of us talk to ourselves a lot, like that internal noise. And we probably need to test it a little bit to ask, is this beneficial? Is this helpful? Is this true?
Is this true?
Because we're also really good at making something sound better than it is. Like when people say comparison, this is a pet peeve, but I can't stand that word because it's like the socially acceptable way to say I envy other people.
Which word? What
Comparison.
word? Oh, okay, yeah.
But that probably steals a lot of energy from a lot of people that doesn't actually have a benefit.
Right.
Sure.
And so just checking your mental thought life might free up a little bit of
The
space.
Greek word for comparison is HGTV, just so you know.
Wow.
Come on now, it is. Come on.
That's pretty good.
Come on, it is.
That's pretty accurate.
It is. And kudos for making a verb out of noble. That's awesome. That's extra credit. Nobilize. That's
Nobilize.
that's extra credit.
Vocab word.
Yeah.
One idea you mentioned on Sunday, going back to the maybe things we need to remove, would be like you talked a little bit about social media and digital media intake, and how much turning that down can help.
Well, I think you just make an assessment. Like, who is discipling you?
Yeah,
That's
it's
another
true.
one. I mean, it's just pure logic. If I'm spending 5 minutes in the Word and 5 hours online, or my teenager is, then it's obvious. It should not shock us if we have a secular worldview versus a Jesus worldview. I mean, it's just not 5 minutes versus 5 hours, which is the average. I mean, it's going to happen. Doesn't mean that, okay, one day, and that's why it's not like one day on social media is going to jack you up. It's not. But over a course of days and weeks and months and years, that is who is going to. And so you just have to almost intentionally go against the culture. And like all of us, it's like she was mentioning guardrails. For me, I was like, all right, I need to put a digital fast in my life as a part of my rule of life, as part of my rhythm. Doesn't mean I don't use it. You guys do most of the stuff anyway. I mean, you all put it out most, but I mean, I'm like, all right, I learned stuff on it's a lot of good stuff. But if I don't ever take a break from it, it starts to, the phraseology, breadcrumb me to death.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll just like go over there. And I mentioned that it started during COVID, doom scrolling.
Yeah.
And part of just the rhythms, like Bible before breakfast, right. Only because it rhymed, versus Bible before social media. I couldn't figure out how to make that work. But basically, Bible before breakfast, like just get in there while your mind is not turned on and freaking, just get in there and let the Lord speak to you.
So it sounds like obviously you're saying you're not opening your phone time in the Word, time in prayer on a daily basis. That's an everyday.
That is an attempt, yes.
Yeah, that's the goal.
I still look to see to get text. I usually look at a text to see if I got something during the middle of the night, because I go to bed before 9 most of the days.
A lot of people are up after you're going to sleep.
True. So I am making sure that nobody died when I was asleep or something like that, because I usually go to sleep at 9, get up about 4.
Yeah.
So I usually make sure nothing's wrong while the coffee's making. But I'm like, all right, don't open stuff, don't browse, don't look at how many clicks you got on Instagram or whatever.
Right.
Because I know that rabbit chase, because it's cool. I mean, golly, you can go on TikTok and see orcas attacking sea lions, and it's amazing. I mean, you can all of a sudden, it's fascinating. I mean, look at that wildebeest. Look at it. How big is that crocodile?
Yep.
And that can all of a sudden, again, 45 minutes goes by, and it is, again, this is good. Just realize it is designed to get you to feed more content.
Right.
And they're smart people. They know exactly what it is. What's that show where they kind of pulled the curtain back on all that stuff? Social. Where they pulled. It actually was
it's a
somebody.
Netflix deal, I think.
Yeah, but
right?
it was like who was it? It was the person that started Facebook or one of those deals. I mean, started.
The majority of people who are in charge of all of these apps, they won't let their children consume them.
Because they know.
They know exactly what they do to the brain. Yeah. And so that is so telling.
Social dilemma.
Yeah, that's it. And it is. And you just look, and again, whether you call it correlation or causation, either way, right around 2010, when all the apps went on there and you could just spend forever on there, is when all the mental health, especially of the younger people, started taking a nosedive, and still continues. So people are like, oh, it's just a coincidence. Is it?
Yeah.
It's not the only reason, but it sure seems odd that it would start the exact year and go straight down the tubes.
Yeah. So, follow up to that, you mentioned on Sunday having a weekly phone Sabbath. What does that look like for you?
Just honestly, it's not like I don't turn it on, because just by the nature of what we do. It'd be kind of bad to do that,
Right.
but it's really just don't, it's tempting because, I mean, it's right there. You can hit Instagram and, I just want to kind of check and see how much traction something's getting. And it's a matter of just, Lori and I, it corresponds with Lori and I having our, basically that 12 hours, pretty much Saturday morning to Saturday evening, trying to protect it. And, never cool when you're looking at your phone or something else on a date.
It doesn't help, does it?
It's never,
No.
that never, and it's not a good rule of life.
No.
Yeah, there you go.
It's a rule of death is what that is to do that. So,
That's great.
and I would say something that Michelle said, nobody talks to you more than you. I mean, that's something that has registered with me. It's like, you're always talking to yourself. You're having this conversation. Now, people have different degrees about, all right, how much access does the enemy have to drop bait or to get in your mind? And that's something we'll deal with in the fall a little bit.
Okay.
And I don't know if I know the answer to that. But either way, whether it be the world, the flesh, the devil, whatever it is that you are thinking thoughts. And I think what Michelle said is evaluate those things. And I would say, is this true? Is this true? If I buy this, why am I buying this? Do I, if that's, do I need that, or do I just feel depressed and I kind of want to feel better? So I know if I spend $100 on these shoes or whatever, it's going to make me feel good.
Yeah.
Which is okay, but if you can't afford it, then you start like, all right, I'm going to have to pay interest on this because I charged on a credit card that I have to pay minimum balance. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so those are just ones you're like, you're making a judgment decision. And anyway.
Yeah, that's great.
Yep.
What would you say some things, maybe daily rhythms or weekly rhythms, that have been super helpful for your spiritual formation?
So I think I always knew the goal was to get to like pray without ceasing. You have to like start different places, but that was something I really wanted to grow in last year of how do I not just keep a prayer journal or go on a prayer walk or talk to God at the beginning of, and then go about my normal day. And so I started a prayer rhythm and I kind of begin my day with a place of surrender, being like, hey God, today is yours. It's your day. I want to go where you want me to go. I want to say what you want me to say. I want to do what you want me to do. So please know I am surrendering this day over to you. I'm sure that I made plans because I am a planner, but if you need to destroy them, please go ahead and do that. So kind of starting my day in that place. And then I try to be grateful to God throughout the day. So instead of just being grateful for something, I want to be grateful to God for that thing. Because the things that I am grateful for are evidence of His grace in my life. It's not just a good gift from Him. It is His grace on display, and I want to acknowledge Him in that. And then I kind of go to bed, like James and I kind of like decompress about the day. Like we talk about that. I've tried to get into a rhythm of doing that with God, of a reflection, which usually ends up in repentance because something there. So it starts reflection, ends repentance, but it has helped me to have those markers in my prayer life of going throughout my day in more of a pray without ceasing mode.
Right.
Yeah, and what she just said, well, it sounds like Romans 12:1 when she's like, start the day off surrender, which just sounds like climbing on the altar. It's like, here we go. But one of the things, especially if somebody listening is still working, they got their calendar and they got their appointments and they have their meetings and they have all that stuff, it's similar to what she said. I've started to get in the habit of praying specifically over the calendar or in the phone. So I'm looking at the phone and I was like, all right, I got a senior team meeting at 2. So I'll pray for those guys.
Yeah.
Or I've got worship planning meeting at 11. So pray over those men and women and what that content's going to be. And then, by the way, it seems like I don't get as irritated if something interrupts those plans. Because I'm like, I prayed about them. So it's like, well, all right, this is not this interruption happened. Well, it's not really an interruption. If I prayed about it, it's like I recognize it easier that, all right, God's just kind of taking the agenda and tweaking it and going
That's
over here.
good.
But the better part is when I'm in a meeting like that, and then God does, like we were in a worship planning meeting a little while ago, and then it was very good, and it went a cool direction. I was like, that's cool, because we talked about that this morning, Lord, remember? And look at you. So
that's awesome.
That's pretty cool. Just praying over
That's
your
awesome.
calendar.
See His hand at work.
Yeah, praying over your schedule, basically, is what
Yeah.
it is.
Man, that's so helpful.
So good.
So 2 more questions as we wrap up. One, how would you encourage people to incorporate community into those rhythms and habits. I know that's something that we're going to be talking about all year. And if I'm getting ahead on a future sermon, let me know.
No, I mean, it really, community is one of the, I would say, the 3 discipleship non-negotiables people have. Now, community, again, one of the things we talked about, that community doesn't necessarily mean you've got to be in a group of 50 people.
Right.
It can be a handful of folks. We have groups of, that we talked about, 2 people as a date and 3 as a group and more. So, but just having people, because you're going to get discouraged, you're going to have blind spots, and that's one of the tools that God has given us to sharpen us. And sometimes you don't realize you're the person that God's going to use to help that other person. And because again, you're learning from people. I mean, I think all of us would say we've learned tons over the years, whether it be marriage, parenting, whatever. A lot of it's been, hey, Ephesians 6, 1-4. All right, this is how you honor your, da-da-da-da. But how do you flesh that out is a lot of times you're looking at how somebody else does it or doesn't do it or does it great or does it not great. And, that's the way you grow.
Yeah.
I think overcommitment and the pursuit of success are probably the 2 things that rob us from our community time more than anything, of just being really honest about where is my time and my energy going. Because if I don't have margin in my schedule for people, then you are probably pursuing the wrong things. And so I think those are the 2 things to check. And then how because to your point is community doesn't mean available for everyone. But I think if you actually have community, you have people who can encourage you and you have people who can correct you. If you have people in your life that can do those 2 things, then you have genuine community.
Yeah. And it's like you have some that'll pull you back from the edge, and then some will pull you up when you're down, and then some will push you forward, when you lack faith or courage or whatever. But honestly, people talk about community. Sometimes they talk about it as an obligation, but man, community is, all it is friends. In most stuff, even if you're an introvert, you need your alone time, that's perfectly fine.
Right.
But even the most introverted person, if they have somebody that's trusted and fun and it's a mutually beneficial in the sense that mutually edifying. I know friendship's not transactional, but it is mutually edifying.
Yeah.
And it's fun. That's why people go to, in a secular way, you go to a football game and it's fun if you're sitting there with 70,000 people and all have the same goal. In that case, the home team, let's cheer for the Panthers. Like that helped.
Yeah, nobody cheers for the Panthers.
Well, nobody. Well, a little bit. They showed a little bit toward the end. I'm thinking Bryce Young's going to do better. He's improving. But even then, there's just something about, that's why it's like one of the testimonies in the staff meeting this morning was this lady who was at the Marion gathering. And she was just saying, I've been watching all this because she used to come to the Arden campus, then she moved out to Marion, and she's like, I'm watching online, but it's good, but it's not the same. And it's like, wow. I was here, and she was at that first really just dry run, and she was just like, it's just so much different to be with people. And that's, we don't think of that as community, but it is. Even in that case, that is community. There's something... There's a reason God said it's not good that man's alone.
That's right.
And it's not good for any of us to be alone over an extended period of time. Again, aloneness can be helpful, but isolation is deadly. There's a difference. Alone time is everybody needs that a little bit. Isolation is where it gets tricky.
Yeah, that's a great clarification. So maybe as we wrap up, we can just clarify. We talked about this a little bit at the front end, but always helpful because it's so easy to drift, as you've talked about a lot. What a rule of life is not. By that I mean a way to earn God's approval, legalism. How do we make sure that we stay on the correct path when it comes to things like that?
Yeah, it's always a temptation depending on how you're built. It is for me, and I'm just guessing it is for you too. Just what I know about you two. It's not licensed. We have to worry about. It's legalism. That's just a guess. I might have it wrong. I don't have the highest EQ, but I think I'm.
You got it. You got it.
I think a lot of it comes down to, and I meant to mention that Sunday almost, but why are you doing it? There is the bottom line of all this stuff is I want to love God. I want to love God. That's the bottom line. And the tools in which you love God and experience His love is, getting in the Word and prayer and repentance and all those things. But I'm trying to think of the difference. It'd be like it's like was it 2 years ago? Like 2 years ago, I went on like my first elk hunt. Mm-hmm. And so leading up to that, I'd never been elk hunting before. And so I was like reading the magazines about elk hunting and, made sure my rifle was sighted in and all that kind of stuff. And it was fine. I mean, sighting the rifle in is fine and shooting and pretending that's there, reading the magazines. But when you actually are like, see the elk, it's not anything like a target or a magazine. It's like, oh, this is real. And that's kind of what I was like, all right, that's like the difference between a rule that you're doing to check the box versus an experience that you have with the Lord. And they're totally different. But I think in this case, the goal is I want to love all these tools. That's to love God.
Right.
I want to be in love with God. Sometimes that means he has to chastise and chasten us, but that's good. He's a loving dad. It's for our good anyway. So that would be to me kind of the barometer to make. If I keep going back to that, I want to love God. That's what this is for, not to earn it. I'm loved already. But I do this because I want to know him better. I want to experience God's love in my life overflowing. Was it 1 John that he lavished his love on us? So that's a great little term. Lavish is like, it wasn't scarce. It wasn't like I give you a little bit. He's like, I want to just pour this stuff out.
Yeah.
But the tools of grace, so to speak, are what we talked about.
Man, that's an excellent way to wrap up today.
So good.
Bonus question. This weekend, Sunday, who you got in the Super Bowl? You get to answer this too, Michelle.
Man. I mean, the Texas Tech Red Faders of Patrick Mahomes. Come on, man. I can't go against. I know everybody hates Kansas City because they think they're getting the calls, and they got a few calls against the Texans for sure. But they're also, I mean, I do like they're pretty for a football team. They tend to hold themselves with class. The Hunts who own them are easy to kind of root for because they try to do things the right way. And honestly, who wants to root for Philadelphia fans? I mean, seriously, who does?
Me, I'm going to take that.
Come on now.
I will.
I saw Carl with an Eagle hat on. I'm like, what discount bin did you get that out of?
I know. You had to bring the Hunts into it. When you stayed at Mahomes, I was like, oh, I'm ready. I'm ready for this. He's easy to go against.
You're a go against Patrick Mahomes? Why?
I don't like anything that other people are. I just know.
We can explore that next episode. What's under the surface?
We'll see. Yeah,
we don't need to know what's under the surface. Something that is under the surface is go Eagles.
I do a plug for the series starting this week too.
Speaking of Sunday, more importantly than the Super Bowl there, we've got a brand new series kicking off, 5 Words to Change Your Family, and obviously that title alone is enough to tell you why you need to be there. But I'm very excited. I know you're kicking it off. I don't know how much you want to say about the direction you're going on this Sunday, what the first word will be, but it's going to be great.
Yeah, Sunday. I mean, the year of community is kind of the overall theme, and our closest community tends to be our family. Now, when we talk family in this series, it's not just talking about who's in your home. It could be your extended family. So it could be your spouse, but we got a ton of single adults, so it could be your parents, could be your siblings, could be your in-laws, could be. So we're basically, because when you look at it, it's basically the relational rules in the Bible or the relational, and then applying them to family. But there's some ones that, families, we talked about it. Family is kind of the bullseye of our existence in a lot of ways. Obviously, we got a church family, we got our relationship with God, but as far as our relationships, if it's good with family, it's pretty good. And if it's not good with family, it's not good. And so, what's the deal? I'm going to try to, this week is trying to instill, I won't say the word per se, but this one's trying to instill some hope that things can be different. Yeah. And they can be. I can say that with confidence, that God does want to change and transform those family relationships.
Yeah, very excited. It's going to be a great Sunday. So every week we're going to close our episodes with a way to put this week's discussion into practice. And obviously today's discussion has been very practical. So we're going to take what's already practical and get it down to what is the term? Brass tacks, right? Just the lowest level. What do we do now? And so Michelle, I want to kick it to you just to think through, how do we actually take some of these ideas and create a rule of life that we can run with?
Yeah, I think the easiest way when you're thinking about breaking down these rhythms is thinking about the frequency. So I feel like in the episode, we really talked about the daily rhythms, the weekly rhythms, getting into some of those. But I do feel like there is some wisdom in some watching some of your rhythms that develop over time, over a longer period of time, and what are some of those helpful rhythms. And so for me, I should be able to determine if I do this more monthly. It's at least quarterly that I do this, but I do something called a fills and drains list, where I just write down, and not necessarily what is already on my schedule that is filling me up or draining me, but okay, what fills me up and what drains me. And then from there, I kind of look at where my time is going and okay, these are the things that fill me up. I'm actually not making intentional space in my week or in my day to make those things happening. So if I'm feeling extra exhausted, maybe that's why they're there. I think one thing to consider though is you don't make a drains list because your plan is to get rid of everything on that list or to delegate it, because the reality of life is that some things are draining.
Right.
But I do think that knowing what drains you is really important so that you can be intentional to have those things that will fill you back up when you're drained.
Yeah, that's great. One of the things that I've got on my computer that I can access from my phone, wherever, is just a document. It's literally a Google Doc, and it's just my own rule of life document. It starts with the why, which we talked about a bunch on this episode of like, why am I going to do these things or not do these things? It's not to earn God's approval, but it's because I want to walk with him. I want to be transformed into his image.
Right.
I want to be formed to be like him. And then I go into, to your point, okay, what are the daily rhythms? What are the weekly rhythms? What are the monthly rhythms? And what are the quarterly and annual rhythms that I want to have but are also realistic, right? You can easily bite off way more than you can chew.
Oh, yeah.
I think the helpful thing to think about is like start where you are, not where you think you should be. So it's like, hey, if you don't have any of these things, just start with one or two under each one of these. If it begins with just daily saying, hey, I want to be in scripture every day and in prayer every day for 20 minutes. Great, start there.
Right.
You know, and then go through each of those categories and start filling those out. And maybe categorizing, do you think through categories, is that the way your brain works or no?
No, and then I actually frame mine in like who language. So like, who do I want to be in my relationship with the Lord? Who would I want to be in my relationship with my husband? Who do I want to be in my relationship with my kids? And then from there, break those down into habits so that I have somewhere to start, because it's not looking at it like a checklist. It's more character driven.
Correct.
And so that tends to help frame it for me.
Yeah, that's great. One other thing, maybe to wrap this up, to think through, that we mentioned briefly on today's discussion is sometimes you got to think addition and subtraction.
That's right.
If you just come into this and you're like, all right, I'm creating this thing, I'm going to have 18 new habits, which is, think about how hard that would be to do at one time.
Right.
But you start there, but you're not thinking about, okay, what are the things that are harmful or not helpful, at the very least, that I need to think about subtracting and put those on there.
Yeah.
I think mine includes some things about like, okay, social media intake. I want to make sure I have good rhythms there so I'm not losing all my time to social media, my sleep habits, things like that, I think are helpful to think through. Any ideas on that front?
Yeah, I think that actually is one of the main things that I use for the drains list of like recognizing, okay, are there any patterns here? Do I see these are the things that I'm doing mostly in the evening? And so maybe I need a new evening routine. I need a new rhythm there. And so definitely when you do exercises like that, when you write things down like this, when you start, look for patterns because they're usually not very hard to spot.
Yeah, especially when you start looking. So I think that's a great place for people to start. Hopefully this encourages you as you begin to take these steps. We want every week to have some action steps for you to continue to follow Jesus even more closely. So hopefully today's episode is a great resource for you. And as we talked about, we're very excited about being back in a new series on Sunday, 5 Words to Change Your Family. I want to invite you to join us at a campus. And we'll be back next Wednesday as well with another episode. As always, you are loved and sent.